Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Big Ten Mafia show, part of the College Football Mafia. I am your host, Sergeant Pickles, and with me, as always, the fantastic Becky Go Huskies, Moen After Dark, and very special guest and friend of the show, Big Ten Ted. How are we doing, Ted?
Good. I'm doing great. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to talk some football here today. I'm ready for we got a little taste of it, right, with an upset there in week 0, and I'm ready for some Big Ten action here in week number 1. We got a lot of good games. A lot of games. There's 3 specific games for me that I think we're going to find out a lot. I think about teams right away, right off the bat in week 1. So I'm excited to break it all down.
Yeah, Becky and Moen, what are your quick thoughts as we got that little quick appetizer from the weekend? We got our very own Georgia Tech with the fantastic upset. Sting 'em. If you drink, don't drive. If you drive, don't drink. You know the rules, people.
I mean, I got to get on a scooter after this and scoot down to the grocery store. That's
a DUI right there.
It's a BUI. Bicycling. It's going to cost me $3 and some change.
Obviously, week 0 is pretty chaotic, but what did we think about, big time game in Ireland, really cool scenic venue, but what do we think about the game itself? Florida State had all these aspirations, trying to avenge a little bit from last year, and didn't quite work out that way.
No. You know what? I'm watching it, and I watched it a second time just because, I had to see it again. Georgia Tech, they dominated Florida State in the trenches, not really on both sides of the ball per se, but offensively they just owned Georgia Tech in the trenches. It's just I've never seen a Florida State team get pushed around like that. Florida State has a right tackle problem because that dude can't block his own shadow. But I have this weird feeling, was it 2008 or something like that, where everybody was upset and nobody wanted to be ranked number 2?
Yeah, that was 2007 actually.
7, baby. Yeah, that was a great year.
That's a great. I think we're due for one of those years because Florida State's not out of it, but we're due for one of those years where teams are like, hey, we all have a shot now. I think everybody's going to get everybody's A game.
To be fair, if we had instant replay in 2007, Ohio State goes undefeated.
Yeah, should have paid the refs more, Moen. I'm perfectly fine throwing everything into a blender. I'd love to see one of those kind of seasons, especially with realignment. And Ted, give us your quick thoughts on Georgia Tech, Florida State, and then you can outline those 3 games week 1 you're looking to.
Yeah, like Becky was kind of saying, it was a trench battle, and that battle was won by the Yellow Jackets in that particular contest, which was interesting. I see Pete Thamel comes on College Game Day and says Florida State has the best defensive line. Someone must have gotten in his ear that does not know a lot of football. So that was very. I'm not saying they're a bad defensive line. Well, in this game, they didn't look great, right, against what Georgia Tech was able to do. So the jury might still be out on where Florida State exactly ranks as a defensive line, but we know where Michigan is. We know where Ohio State is. Georgia is certainly going to be up there as some of the best. And I've never been, DJ Uyunglele has played, I think, one really good game in his career, right? The COVID year when he was subbing for Trevor Lawrence against Notre Dame, right? He lit it up in that particular contest. Other than that, he's been fine at Oregon State. Right, I know the Pac-12 was really loaded with quarterbacks last year, so he was going up against a pretty good roster in terms of ranking, where he ranked in that conference last season. But I just don't see him as a quarterback that can really make a big time difference this year. So Florida State is a team. I think they got Notre Dame on their schedule. Of course, they got Miami on their schedule. So there's going to be some games that are still going to be very competitive, I think, for the Noles this season. And then, to quickly wrap up week 0, you got a team out there, a lot of people were saying dark horse ACC and SMU that also struggled a little bit with Nevada out there as well. So you guys mentioned the chaotic, right? I think a lot of people were expecting, hey, SMU is going to set the tone, new conference can say, hey, we're a power conference school now. didn't go that way. They looked like a G5 school, right, for most of that game, and Nevada kind of threw it away there. And then Florida State gets upset. Maybe this is a chaotic start. Maybe we're going to see it next week. Maybe there's going to be a bunch of upsets as well.
Hey, we got 2 upsets this last weekend because Montana State beat New Mexico.
Hey, I'm a Grizz fan, but
that wasn't an upset, though.
That was not an upset. Montana State, weren't they double-digit favorites at one point?
They were double-digit favorites. All 4 dogs covered this weekend. All 4
now,
dogs
the thing about Montana State, and Sergeant Pickles and I could maybe talk about FCS football forever.
A little bit, yeah.
My first job was in Fargo covering the Bison. So Montana State, like the top 5, you look like Dakota schools, it's Montana schools right now. So it's not surprising that they were a favorite necessarily, but double digits really popped out to me. But yeah, that was kind of a crazy game that certainly went back and forth as well. Maybe just maybe the Bison can make it 2 in a row this week for an FCS school, but maybe we can talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, little non-Big Ten related, but
I know, right?
You got North Dakota State and South Dakota State, and unfortunately, Colorado and Oklahoma State chose their FCS scheduling timing poorly. Yeah. But it remains to be seen. But other than that, I know we got certainly a Big Ten matchup, Big Ten ACC matchup that is highly anticipated. And our very own Big Ten Ted appears to be covering that game. Can you preview it for us a little bit there?
Yeah, let's talk about it. Yeah, I'll be there. Might be a little bit rainy, so I'll bring my rain gear. I'll bring my rain jacket over there for that one. Minnesota hosting North Carolina. Boy, neither of these coaches are giving away anything. Now, PJ Fleck is notoriously tight-lipped for giving anything away in terms of who's starting here or an injury report or anything like that. Mac Brown says he's not going to announce his starting quarterback if it's Drake May in the NFL now. Max Johnson is out there. I think that it should be him, but there's a couple of guys that also are in the mix to be the quarterback for the Tar Heels this season. But this is an interesting game because I think when you look at Minnesota, this is a ground and pound football team. They want to be physical. If the line has recently favored Minnesota, today it flipped now -1.5 in favor of North Carolina. Now, does Vegas know something that we don't know? Okay. Darius Taylor was limping at practice a couple of weeks ago, their star running back. Daniel Jackson has been maybe nursing some injuries lately. Does Vegas know that maybe those guys won't be 100%? If those guys aren't 100%, that certainly gives advantage North Carolina in this football game. Now, when you look at the Tar Heels, this is an offensive line. They lose 4 out of their 5 starters from last season. They've got 2 sophomore tackles right there, and we mentioned the new quarterback. So for Minnesota, unleash Ja Joyner, unleash Danny Strigo. They have a really good and a really deep defensive line, specifically coming off the edge. So get in the face of the quarterback and try to disrupt, because North Carolina returns, I believe it's 5 of 6 leading receivers from last year. They're top 5 of 6. Only Tez Walker, right, is the guy that's kind of not coming back, of course, to North Carolina. This season, Minnesota gave up 414 yards through the air last year. Now, it was Drake May, but this secondary loses Tyler Nubin back there at safety. There's some questions back there. So this is kind of a contrast of styles. Can Minnesota's offense beat their best defense by keeping UNC on the sidelines? And then we talked about the mystery, kind of at the top with coaches not revealing much. This is an interesting contrast of a game here to really start off the season. And Minnesota, they have a little bit of a tougher schedule this year. A win over North Carolina might be what is needed for them to go bowling at the end of the year.
Yeah, obviously pulling for a conference mate. And I've got mixed feelings about this next game because we have a lot of Mountaineer friends in chat. They like to frequent the Big Ten show. But it's a big one. It's a rivalry, old school Big East, and there's a lot on the line. It's in Morgantown, which I think actually is a big factor. But go ahead and line up the Nittany Lions versus Mountaineers for us. Yeah,
boy, oh boy, have these two fan bases been going at it on the Twitter sphere. And it's been fun to sit back, and it's been fun to watch this all go down. When it comes to Penn State, of course, we're talking about it from the Big Ten angle, but this run game from West Virginia, right? That's the main thing, right? You slow down West Virginia's run game. You feel really confident that you're going to be able to make it 2 in a row against the Mountaineers. Garrett Green, Jaheim White, CJ Donaldson running the ball over 2,400 yards last season, combined 20. I think it was something like 28 touchdowns as well. So you got to find a way to crowd the box. Now, Garrett Green, 54% completion rate last year. That was the same as Ethan Kaliak-Manis. So, and then they lose their top wide receiver. So I think it's going to be tough to throw the football, despite Penn State losing 3 of their better defensive backs. They backfilled with some really good options as well. And I'm looking forward to really any game against Penn State, but specifically in this one, of course, you got to protect. And Abdul Carter and Danny Dennis Sutton coming off the edge are just athletic freaks. Like, you lose Chop Robinson, Adisa Isaac, and you just backfill with these guys. It's almost unfair out there as well. So if Penn State can really load up, stop this run game, and then they also put pressure on Garrett Green, I feel confident that Drew Aller can throw the ball. Like, I know that West Virginia got some transfers back there in the secondary. They were middle of the pack last year in the Big 12. Drew Aller had his best game last year against West Virginia, 21 of 29, over 300 yards and 3 scores. I think he could do it again, throw the ball, stretch the field a little bit, open up those run lanes, get some guys out of the box. I think this one really shapes up well for Penn State. Would not surprise me, though, if it's close early on the road.
Yeah, that seems to be the general sentiment, is that, Penn State's the favorite for a reason. They're certainly deep and talented, but West Virginia rivalry game in Morgantown, I don't think it would shock anyone to say West Virginia pulled the close upset. It's not out of the cards at all.
Yeah, I think a lot of different things need to happen. I think West Virginia's defense, most importantly, needs to be able to step up, and they need to get Penn State off bound. They need to hit that run game right away, and they just need to be whether it's design stuff, read, RPO type of stuff, to get Penn State off balance. But yeah, that's their path to victory, is run the football very effectively. Not only against Penn State, but I think a lot of the rest of their schedule.
I think it also, like, in that game, I want to see Drew Aller actually grip it and rip it and see how far he's come since last year.
Yeah, be the dude.
He looked halfway decent last year against West Virginia, but it was his first start, and it was at home, right? This is his, like, he's been on the road, obviously, but this is his, like, first start of the season. It's on the road, brand new offense. Ted, what kind of offense can we expect from Penn State? New offensive coordinator, new system. What are we going to see?
Yeah, when you look at Kansas's personnel last year, and then you look at Penn State's personnel, it's a little bit different. So Andy Kotelnicki is very creative. His play design is very interesting. Sometimes will that work with somebody like maybe more of a true pocket passer with Drew Aller? It's not going to be a complete copy and paste from what you saw over there at Kansas. But I think one thing that is for certain, I think they're going to be more effective down the field in the throw game. I know their wide receiver group certainly is not one of the top wide receiver groups in the Big Ten, but I think it's going to be better. And I think it has to be better this season, because if it's not better, like, you look at what Drew Aller was on schedule, and you mentioned it in that game against West Virginia, he looks pretty good. But when teams are able to get in face, Ohio State is able to get in his face. When Michigan, was able to get in his face. There was even, you look at the early parts of that game at Northwestern last year, Drew Aller was just out of rhythm. Was a little bit groggy. Those morning games at Northwestern can kind of get you that way. But, I think you're going to see more down. Drew Aller has a really good arm. Okay, he has the arm strength certainly to get it down the field. It's just Mike Yurcich didn't do that. And now a lot of teams, when that's the case, they can creep up. They know what they have in the run game. They can creep up, and if they get in the face of Drew Aller and if they halt this run game, that really equals a lot of success. That's what Michigan was able to do, and that's what Ohio State was able to do as well. Now, if you can stretch the football down the field, that opens up so many different things in the run game and the throw game. And also watch out for tight end Tyler Warren. I think he could be one of the best tight ends in the Big Ten. I really do. That's going to be a matchup for West Virginia that's going to be very challenging. I firmly believe that. So Julian Fleming needs to step up and be a number one guy. Harrison Wallace needs to step up and be a 1B or a number 2 guy. So there's a lot that needs to happen, I think, for Penn State to really take a significant jump forward, but I certainly think that they're going to be better offensively.
Yeah, absolutely. And real quick to chat, apologies, we know we got comments coming in, a lot of people asking good questions, but due to time constraints and trying to get through all this, it will have to be a super chat tonight. We really appreciate everyone being here. Real quickly, Stormy Cyclone has become a YouTube member. We really appreciate it. Yeah, if you're a member or thinking about becoming a member, especially going into the season, we have more members chats coming up and members-only videos breaking down things as we're getting into the season. And last but not least, Ted, we have the mighty battle in Las Vegas against, I'm calling this the conference pretender or conference contender bowl, because I think both teams have the ability to contend for their conferences, but I think both have the potential of being middling and or frauds. What do you think about that?
I would agree with that. That's a pretty accurate statement. I call it the Spider-Man meme of college football games, because these two teams are exactly the same. It's crazy how similar LSU and USC are. I put something out on Twitter. I cut something up and I did something with it backward. Just how similar Brian Kelly's Tigers and Lincoln Riley's Trojans are in this game. I think we're going to see a lot of big plays down the field. I think both defenses are breaking in new systems, new coaching staff, new personnel as well, and they're going to have to adjust on the fly. Whichever defense adjusts on the fly the best, I think is going to have an opportunity to win this game. But here's the thing. I think it's maybe going to come down to who makes a stop. Like you guys know, as Washington fans, like you look at USC and Washington last season, where both offenses were going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Yep. Washington was able to step up, make a couple of stops down the stretch in the second half, and thus they were able to win the football game over there at the Coliseum that season. I could see something very similar. I don't know if we'll get quite the same points output as that game did out there in LA, but who knows? Maybe it could be on a fast track at a neutral field. But yeah, this is such a huge opportunity for USC right out of the gate. I like the additions that they've made in the secondary, right? I like Kamari Ramsey. I like John Humphrey. I like Achille Arnold. I think Easton Mascarenas Arnold could be an all Big Ten linebacker, really, when all is said and done. What concerns me for USC is their defensive line outside of Bear Alexander. I think there's some concerns there. Can Danton Lynn scheme some things up to free up some pressure? That's going to be a big question. Harold Perkins, right, for LSU, they got to find a way to shade their offensive line probably in his direction, and then what comes off the other side as well. So I think there are some questions for USC in this game, but this is such a mystery game to me. I think we're going to see a lot of offense. I would be shocked, I guess. I was going to say shocked. I'd be shocked if this game does not go over, if it goes under 45 points. You know, if it's something like that.
Oh, easy.
I think we're going to see a lot of up and down. We're going to see a lot of up and down. And then whoever can make those big plays, and then on the other side, whoever can kind of ease the pain of some of those big plays and make enough stops down the stretch is going to win this game. But you're right, USC sits in the spot right now. Some people are talking about them dark horse college football playoff, and I potentially see the pieces. If they can be a top 10 offense in college football, if they can be a 50th to 60th ranked defense, you know, almost similar, maybe not quite as high of a ceiling, but similar to his teams at Oklahoma, right, where they had an elite offense and an average defense. If they can be in that mold, I could maybe see them, you know, having some success. But that being said, we mentioned LSU on the schedule, Notre Dame's on the schedule, Penn State's on the schedule. You know, there's some good football teams certainly on this USC schedule as well. But as it pertains to this game, I can't wait. I can't wait to see Miller Moss get out there and sling it, to see if he can have a follow-up performance of his bowl game against Louisville. This, to me, is probably the game I'm most excited to really see this weekend, just because there's so much of a mystery.
My concerns in this game are like Ted said, it's the interior, the D line for USC, because Bear Alexander is a beast, but the biggest issue I have with USC is, did they get busy enough at the linebacker and at safety in order to contend with what will be a good running game from LSU? Like, LSU wants to run the ball. It's an SEC defense or offense. You're going to pound the rock. Like, you're just going to beat the crap out of that D line, because there's no depth. Like, I know USC fans are like, we have a lot of depth this year. I'm like, No, you don't. There's not a ton of depth. Like, these guys are not big, especially once you get into that linebacking core. I mean, they had a guy last year, I can't remember his name. He's like 6'8", 200 pounds playing linebacker. And he's just like teamed like Dylan Johnson ran right over him, like just him in that Washington game.
He did that to a lot of people, in fairness, though.
But in fairness, that's the kind of back that LSU has. They have beefy, stocky running backs because it's the SEC. You have to be able to, like, if you're not running the ball 25 times, 30 times a game, you're probably not winning. I'm just very concerned. I know that they're going to flip the switch at some point, and maybe they don't give up 40 points a game or anything again. But my concerns with USC in this game is, do you have the depth to keep up with an SEC opponent who has a ton of 5-star depth? Like, we're not talking transfers. We're not talking, guys. They've just got depth. They've got 4- and 5-star players littered everywhere on that defense, and they're not starting. So for me, that's the biggest key to this is, can they keep up? But then on the flip side of this, we're not even talking about LSU's trash defense from a year ago. Did we forget LSU can't play defense? Did we just forget that overnight? Like, I'm with Ted. Like, I just looked, ESPN Bet has this game over under at 64.5. No way, it's 64.5. This is going to be like an 80-point. I think this is going to be an 80-point game. Like,
traditional Big Ten teams will learn, the further west you go, the higher the overs get.
64.5. That is like mind-boggling number from having followed this conference for 30 years.
That's nothing. There was a Pac-12 after dark. I think it was the Cougars versus UCLA. The total hit, I think, 130. It was insane.
No, like this game, like USC is going to bring. It's an air raid offense. LSU is terrible against the pass. Yeah, LSU is terrible against the pass. This is going to be an insanely high-scoring game unless, like, we see both defenses actually are better than what they are.
Well, you mentioned that air raid concepts that USC has offensively. There's an offense at Wisconsin that's known as the Dairy Raid, right, with Phil Longo, and look what they were able to do. Wisconsin, now maybe I'm speaking through some fandom here, through, as you say, purple glasses for you, maybe red glasses for me for Wisconsin and my fanhood, but I feel like the Badgers should have won that bowl game last year, and you saw how they were able to move the football up and down against that LSU defense. Now, I know, like I said, new coaching staff, maybe some new personnel in there as well, but I'm not looking at Wisconsin as an outstanding offense, right? I'm trying to be fairly biased, for my Badgers here, but and then they were still able to move the football, right, against the Tigers. And then you put a USC with Zach Branch, Deuce Robinson, Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane, and all of these guys, that could equal some problems. So you mentioned LSU, the toughness, the running the football. That could be the kryptonite for USC if they can keep the Trojan offense on the sidelines in this game. So that should certainly be a fun matchup. Boy, I can't wait to see this one. I can't wait to see this one and see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, appointment viewing for sure. Mo, you got any quick thoughts on the three we've outlined for Week 1 games?
No, on the Penn State side, I really want to see how Julian Fleming performs. He is now going to be the guy at Penn State. He was always surrounded by talent at Ohio State, could never really sort of get set in the picture in a good spot at Ohio State. So if he can be the X factor at Penn State, that's going to go a long way in the development of Drew Allard.
Yeah, absolutely. And getting into it, we appreciate everyone stopping by. As I said, if you want comments, we're ripping through them today, so please make it a super chat. We just have too much to get to. And going into the Big Ten season, we got some new tiebreakers, Moen, if you want to throw those up for us. We saw the SEC came out with theirs a few days ago, but it seems like they're going more or less the same route. The curious one to me there, I believe, second from bottom, they're going to use some data analytics model to spit out numbers, which just my tinfoil conspiracy hat goes up that they're going to use that to put in the team they want to put in. What do we think about that? We'll go to Ted first.
This is, like you said, the SEC has things very similar to this. as well. I thought I saw someone post on Twitter that the guy or the president of this company that has this analytics model is a Vanderbilt grad. I'm like, can we at least get a Northwestern grad in here? Like, come on, man. But anyway,
you got a lot of smart Big Ten schools now. We got
I
schools coming in.
I know. But yeah, not like common opponents like that. This is nothing groundbreaking at all.
Right.
I want to see us, whether it's the SEC, Big Ten, or whatever. I want to see us get all the way to the bottom one year. Like,
yes,
that is fantastic television viewing. Like the Big Ten Network can pull up some big ratings, have this draft lottery, and just have like the 2 or 3 ping pong balls bouncing around like that. That's some, and have all of the head coaches lined up. That could be some really suspenseful television in there as well. SEC, I think they talked about, hey, we gotta do this draw at a Buc-ee's truck stop or something. So maybe we could do it. We could do it up at a Quick Trip here in the Midwest or something. But yeah, it's nothing too surprising. I'm very intrigued to really see if this is going to happen this year, and then how many times. There's been rumors floated out there, maybe about a potential semifinal round as well. So if we get too many tiebreakers and it costs the team something or another, is that going to put more pressure on to have it add an extra round, not only in this conference, but in other conferences as well? So these are just little things to certainly keep an eye on.
Yeah. The sicko in me just wants the last choice, number 6. I don't care about the rest. Give me 6.
Just go straight to 6.
Just go straight to 6.
Every year, just straight to coin.
Number 6 just needs to be renamed the Woody Bow Rule in honor of the 1973 Rose Bowl.
There you go.
There we go.
And just name it the Woody Bow Rule, and that's why we don't have athletic directors deciding.
Yeah, shout out to our friend of the show, Immaculate. He's been on the semifinal train for a long time, and we've discussed it ad nauseum over the offseason, the pros and cons. It would create some really compelling football. You'd have, a pretty unanimous thing that, oh yeah, this is the deserving champion out of 4 teams. But you're talking about between the CFP and a semifinal, like 5, 6, 7 rounds of football to become a champion. Like that's insane, even compared to the NFL.
You got to figure some things out. You got to figure some things out scheduling wise at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe build it in to the night where you have like an 8-game conference and then a +1. During COVID, they were going to do what they called this Champions Week, where they had 1 versus 2, 3 versus 4, 5 versus 6, and so on and so forth. I think a lot of teams ended up getting COVID that week, if I remember correctly, and we didn't have a lot of those games. So maybe we could do that, where you have 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3, and then every team gets an extra game somehow. But that's kind of one unique way to kind of build it in. But yeah, you just can't keep adding games and adding games. But then at some point, you expand a conference to 20 teams, 22 teams, 24 teams. It's gonna be very difficult. You could see a bunch of teams. You could see 3 or 4 teams annually sitting.
You'll never see certain teams if you do it that way.
Yeah, right.
I guess
real quick, our friend Keep Chopping, Rutgers fan, says doing it the come and go in Iowa.
Oh, nice. That's a good one.
Good shout out.
A good one as well. Yeah.
Yep.
I was just gonna say, like, I would love to see like part of the season suddenly become a playoff, but we have to think about it like this. How many games do the pros play? So whatever happens, this can't exceed whatever the pros play, because that would be insane. Like if the pros are getting beat, everybody gets beat up once you hit high school. Like athletics, it doesn't matter the sport. It gets harder, it gets tougher, but the body takes the beating. And these are kids. We're not talking like 30-year-old men. We're talking outside of BYU. We're not talking about 30-year-old men. So we're talking about 22, 18, 19. Most of these kids will probably be 20, 21, because the top players are basically drafted at 20 now. So at some point, we have to how many games can they play? How many games can we make this? But again, I don't care. I want to see 6 be the deciding factor for the very last seed for everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
For
NFL playoffs.
Just make it what? We know the top 3. Everybody else, we're just going to throw all the other teams into the hat, and we're going to draw you out. It could be 1-9, in 1-9 in conference Northwestern. I don't care. Let's let it happen. While 9-1 Michigan's left out. I don't care.
Man, yeah, the media would never allow it, but it's certainly something to look at. Most years it'll be pretty straightforward who belongs where, and it'll be very interesting to shake out. I do think that there's a higher possibility of one-loss teams going into a championship. I think you will see less undefeated teams with the nature of these conferences now. But now it is time, and please, everyone, go check out, if you do not already, I'm sure you do, go check out Big Ten Ted's channel, his YouTube channel. He does insane breakdowns. I listen to him like a podcast while I'm at work, and he recently did his extravaganza Big Nation offensive rankings, defensive rankings, upsets, everything. If you want to become a wizard in knowing things about the Big Ten, he is the man. I am just a talking idiot who likes hanging out with my friends and talking some ball. For the real info, we go to guys like Ted, so we really appreciate that. And to give us a taster of those insanely good breakdowns, we're going to go reverse flyover commercial. So we end with my beloved Washington Huskies, mine and Becky's. But Ted, we're going to go ahead and kick it off. Moen, if you could throw it up there. Just give us a short synopsis preview. Obviously, certain things have happened with teams. Give us a player to watch and maybe an underrated game that you're really circling, not necessarily a rival or a standout matchup. But I know for Rutgers, they lost their very, very highly vaunted linebacker, who I would have expected to be a player to watch.
Yeah, losing Mohamed Toure. They're also talking about Tyreen Powell, who was that great linebacker duo, that he might be out for the first couple of games. So they got to figure out quickly who's going to kind of step in and fill the role of that defense. But they return almost everybody on that defense. A player to watch, Kyle Monangai, the running back for Rutgers, actually led the Big Ten in rushing, 1,200 yards, double-digit touchdowns last season. So that's certainly one player to keep an eye on. This was a fairly one-dimensional offense last year, and I think they've stepped up. I'd also watch out for transfer wide receiver Dymere Miller. He was a 1,000-yard FCS All-American type of guy at Monmouth, so hopefully him, we got Ethan Kaliakmanis coming over from Minnesota, but hopefully he can kind of expand on that defense a little bit. When you look at key games, I want to start early in the season. I want to start with Rutgers going to Virginia Tech. Like that, that 4-game stretch, Virginia Tech, Washington, Nebraska, and Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's make or break.
It's a very interesting stretch because Rutgers 9 wins. Maybe Rutgers will win 10 games. As long as they have Ethan Kaliakmanis, I can't go there for them. I can't. I've seen him. He he's just a little bit better than Gavin Wimsatt statistically, right? So I can't go there. But that Virginia Tech game, a lot of national folks are writing it off as a Hokie win. Rutgers dominated last year. I know a lot of people really like Hydron Drones over there at Virginia Tech, but that's a key because if they can win that one, they play Washington on a Friday night, which is, I know you guys are repping your purple and gold. That's tough going across the country on a Friday night. Rutgers, underrated night atmosphere, by the way. They can bring it on some of these night games as well over there on the East Coast on the boardwalk. But that's one that really, because if they fall to Virginia Tech, you got a Washington team that will likely be undefeated at this point in time. If you fall to them and their passing attack is just too much, Nebraska and Wisconsin is a tough follow-up. So I think Virginia Tech will kind of set the tone for that stretch, certainly. It's a team with a stout defense. They were in the upper half of the Big Ten in a conference full of really good defenses last year. They're a run game. This is I almost call them a mini Michigan, right? They run the ball. They play great defense. They're a tough, physical-minded team. But don't let mini distract you from the fact that it hurts when you play against them. It hurts even when you watch them play the game of football over there. But the big thing for them is, can they get to that 8 or 9 win level? To do that, they need to be better in the passing game.
Yeah, absolutely. And purple glasses on, we circled that Washington Huskies matchup. But I think even as, non-fans, I think that game, to me, it says so much about where both teams are at heading into the meat of their Big Ten conference schedules. It really is a barometer for both teams, especially Washington. It's that, everyone made fun of it. Oh, you're going to Rutgers on a Friday, and that's what you went to the Big Ten for. Yep, we got it. And now you're going to see it for real and see if they can really, deal with the travel, deal with a brand new season, brand new coach. So, but yeah, that 4-game stretch is absolutely brutal. Becky or Moen, you guys got any other games that stand out to you or anything to add?
That Virginia Tech one is huge.
Yep.
If Rutgers wins that game against Virginia Tech, which is supposed to be a very good Virginia Tech squad.
Yeah, in Blacksburg.
Watch out. They could hit, and I know they lost the linebacker, and that hurts you more than having any Kaliak Manis as quarterback. That linebacker was going to be a first-round draft pick.
Yeah. Butkus Award type guy from everything I saw.
Yep.
So, but Schiano, he's built a culture there at Rutgers. I think that's important. Those guys play their hearts out for him. They hit for him. Ted's right. They hit hard.
Yeah,
it is a speed defense. They will just lower the helmet and nail you. So,
yeah.
Yep.
For me, it's that Friday night game at USC. That game right there, playing UCLA at home, that game right there could make getting to a bowl game extraordinarily tough if they drop that game. I don't think they're going to win. If they lose the 4 in a row that we think they could potentially lose, getting to 4-4 and getting back to 500 makes the math a little bit easier against what should be some decent teams that are going to be scrapping as well for a bowl game. For me, and that game is 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
Oh man,
stupid. I don't understand who's doing this. Why Fox is like, we'll put it at 11 p.m.
People, let's go.
It's clearly because they've got a baseball game on from the playoffs that day. But that game, 11 p.m., I think that to me makes or breaks their year. Because if they lose that game and they fall to 3-5, they're going to have to win 3 out of 4 to get in. And I don't know if they can do it. I know we're not talking about barn burners here in Minnesota, Maryland, Illinois, Michigan State, but Michigan State's should be better this year than years past. Illinois is still going to have a tough defense. Maryland, they're breaking in a new quarterback, but they were really close to being decent last year. I mean, they played well against Michigan for 4 quarters. So Minnesota, this could break their year. That game could break their year, and that for me is the scary thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to our resident Scarlet Knight fan in chat. Watch USC play like a Big Ten team. Yeah, at past midnight Eastern, I think everyone just wants to run the ball and run the clock out and go home. So I don't blame you there. All righty, so we got a quick Rutgers preview. A lot to be excited about for the Scarlet Knights, but moving down, they are Tagovailoa less, but Mike Loxley, he's got the man to really set their offense straight. He's got the vaunted and highly sought-after Brian Ferenz in the house. What do we think, Ted? Are they going to be slinging 70 a game now?
So here's the exit. I'm going to start there since that, with Brian. I believe it got passed this year. Some things some rules and news kind of brushed past me. I think analysts can actually coach practices and in games this year. Yes, Brian Ferentz, for as much as a lot of people make fun of him, and trust me, he earned it. He earned it. Okay. I'm not certainly. He is a borderline elite offensive line coach. Okay. When he was strictly able to focus on the offensive line at Iowa, his offensive lines won Joe Moore awards. Players were drafted off of that Hawkeyes offensive line. Now Maryland needs some help on their offensive line. They brought in a ton of transfers. So now that he's able to be a part of practice and be a part of games, that could maybe make a difference. It's something to keep an eye on. I still think there is a good amount of issues and a good amount of help that they need on their offensive line. But when you look at Maryland, of course, the quarterback battle is very interesting. Last year, backup Billy Edwards, he was more of a mobile guy, a dual threat type of guy, played well in the bowl game. They brought in transfer MJ Morris. He's a younger guy. He seems to be the best of both worlds because they got Cam Edge, a guy at quarterback as well. They got a guy, he can throw it down the field. Billy Edwards is more of a runner. And then MJ Morris, although he's younger, it seems like he's the mold of everything, but now the smoke is lately in that it's drifting a lot more towards Billy Edwards. So How is Mike Locksley going to incorporate more of that designed quarterback run game? I'm very intrigued with that, but there's some good weapons. Roman Hemby is a really good Big Ten running back. Okay, so you got him. You got Ty Felton. You got Caden Prather on the outside. Octavian Smith. This is a Maryland offense that just pumps out good receivers. So I'm not really concerned about that as well. But what I'm really excited about with Maryland is their defense. I think this is the best defense of the Mike Locksley era. I think they're going to be stronger up front of the defensive line. Now, it's crazy to say this because they lose Jayshon Barham to Michigan, who might have been their best defender, most talented defender. They lose Bo Braid in the secondary. They lose Tarheeb Still, their top corner. And yet they have the depth to be able to rise up. Brian Williams, their defensive coordinator, I think is one of the more underrated coordinators. He could be a head coach at this time next season. So certainly watch. So I think they're going to be better on defense. They don't have quite the talent at quarterback that they did last season. How does it all come out in the wash? I think it comes out in the wash like a typical Maryland year. I think they could win 6 games. I think they could win 7 games if things really go well this season. Right? They've been a 6 to an 8 win with the bowl games that they've won, going from 7-5 to 8-5. A 6 to 8 win team. That's just kind of where they're set in the grand scheme of things. When it comes to players on defense, I'd watch out for Ruben Hippolyte. Okay, even though Jayshon Barham was the maybe most talented player on defense, Ruben Hippolyte, I believe, did lead the team in tackles last season as well. So I'd certainly watch out for him. They've got a deep defense in there as well. So this is going to be, it could all just be business as usual in College Park this year.
Okay. And if you had to circle your game to watch, I just eyeballing this schedule. That last 4. You better stack wins early, Maryland fans, because that is brutal. Honestly, from USC down, but that last 4 bang in a row, no days off, end of the season, that is rough.
Couple of different perspectives I want to take with the game to watch. Like you said, it's very favorable early in the season, which is textbook Maryland. They get out to a 5-1 start or a 6-0 start, and then down the stretch it does not go well. Like that's been the Terps' MO here for during the Taulia Tagovailoa era, right, when they've been able to have a little bit more success. Boy, I'm going to go at Indiana. Maryland, Indiana has been it's been a competitive series in the Big Ten East, the former Big Ten East. Now Indiana's a team with Curt Cignetti. Man, I believe in him. I believe in Curt Cignetti and what he's doing there. That's going to be an offense that can get up and down. Indiana quietly has like a top 5 wide receiver core this season in the conference because, like you said, they need to get out to a hot start. If they're not able to get it done against Indiana, Michigan State is one, even week 2, that I think could be very close as well, that you got to circle. It's a lot of these first games. USC, you get them at your place, and USC at that time, they would have played Michigan, they would have played LSU, they would have played Wisconsin. So we'll see exactly where the Trojans are at physically at that point in time. But for me, it's that Indiana game because, if you fall to the Hoosiers at that point, you have Northwestern, which is not a pushover. Northwestern was able to win that matchup last season. So, for me, I'm going to circle that Indiana game to really keep the momentum going early because they need to keep it going early in the season. Like you said, with that back half of the schedule, that is pretty brutal.
Absolutely. Mo and Rebecca, anything to add?
No. I mean, for me,
on to Penn State.
It's like
all right, James Franklin and the close but no cigar Penn State Nittany Lions. How are we feeling about them, Ted? I mean, new conference, but their schedule seems to stack up pretty favorably for them.
Yeah, I'll tackle it since I forgot about it last time. I'll tackle the game and then the player first. When it comes down to the game, I'm going to go USC.
Whiteout versus Washington. Let's go.
Well, I'm going to go USC. Even though I did pick an upset of Wisconsin being able to win that one as kind of a look ahead right before Ohio State, that USC game, it'll tell us a lot, I think, about both teams at that point in time. Penn State has aspirations for the college football playoff, right? So at minimum, you need to be 10-2. And we mentioned before, what if USC at this point, what if they lose to LSU? What if they lose to Michigan? Right at this point, they might be unranked, right, at that point in time. So at that particular point, it could be not a super duper marquee win. Now it could be USC could have won those games by that point as well. So, but I think when you look at the rest of the schedule outside of Ohio State, like there's not a ton of opportunities to get ranked wins. So I think you need, when you look at the Missouris of the world and the Ole Misses of the world, those are teams with manageable schedules in the SEC. There's an opportunity, there's a chance where maybe a 10-2 Penn State team could be on the outside looking in. So I look at that USC team. Of course, Penn State loses their top 3 defensive backs last year. Can USC throw the football over the top on all of this? But I look at that game, man. USC's tackles and Abdul Carter and Danny Dennis Sutton, man, they are licking their chops. Penn State is at that point in time. But if USC is able to get the win at Penn State, you got to follow it up with Wisconsin on the road. You got Ohio State as well. So if they're able to lose that game, that we talked about that 4-game stretch before with Rutgers. That 3-game stretch right there is not the easiest in the world for Penn State.
Yeah, it occurs to me looking at it between UCLA and playing at home versus Washington, they go 1 full calendar month not playing in Happy Valley. And,
right.
Tough games, tough opponents. Yes, you get the bye in between, but not being able to set foot in your home stadium for a month, I think that is truly a tough test between those 2 games.
That's tough. And then for players, there's so many, there's a lot to pick from. I'm going to go Abdul Carter on the defensive side of the football. I think he could be an absolute menace. He was an all Big Ten linebacker. You move him to defensive end, I think he's going to be even better. He put on some weight, right? He's just an absolutely perfect size for an edge rusher right there. I think he's going to lead the Big Ten in sacks. I think he's going to be maybe the best edge guy in the country this season, which is crazy when you have Danny Dennis Sutton on your own team, when you have Jack Sawyer and JTT over at Ohio State, right? When you have Jordan Birch at Oregon, you have some of these other really good players within this conference. I think Abdul Carter, who was a linebacker last year, I think he's going to be that guy. And I think he's going to create a lot of problems, I think, for opposing teams. So opposing teams in the Big Ten, if your offensive tackles and pass protection is not what it should be, and you have Penn State on their schedule, hope and pray, I guess is what I can tell you, because they're going to get after it. They are going to get after it, and it's going to be tough to contain them, certainly this season. But their hopes, it's playoff hopes. It's playoff hopes. It's a busted season if they don't get to the college football playoff.
Yeah, it's put up or shut up for James Franklin, it seems.
They got to win big game, plain and simple. Right, he really hasn't won a big game since 2016. Right, that blocked field goal against Ohio State that season out there when they won the Big Ten championship. Right, so he's got to find a way. If it is USC, if USC is a top 15 team at that point, got to get that win. Right, Ohio State is going to be extremely difficult, even though it is at Beaver Stadium. If they get through this at 10-2 or 11-1, they got to get to the playoff. And then I think when you get to the playoff, if they lose right away, I think you're in the same type of discussion. Where even if they do go 11-1, and you finish 11-2 after the playoff loss, I think you're in the same boat as you've been the last few years. Look, you never want to get disappointed with winning 10 games, but there might be a point where Penn State says, we want more eventually. We want to take that next step and the next progression as a football program. So it'll be an interesting year to see if that happens again. What's going to be the offseason changes in Happy Valley?
Yeah, careful what you wish for, Nittany Lion fans.
Exactly.
But Mo or Becky, you got anything?
Yeah, for me, it's that November 9th game.
Oh gosh,
no,
come on,
hear me out. Hear me out.
Glasses.
No. Hear me out. If they lose to USC and Ohio State, what is Penn State? They do these whiteouts. That's a whiteout game. How good is Penn State in a whiteout game?
Meh.
They can't drop that game. The next week is at Purdue, and people go, "Oh, well, it's Purdue. They'll beat Purdue." Those are the 2 games. They're going to lose one of those 2. Even if they go undefeated, they're probably still going to lose one of those 2. If they
now that you
State,
said something, you said something. It's definitely going to be Purdue now. Thanks, Becky. You jinxed us.
No, I mean, I'm just saying, those are the 2 games for me. One of those 2, they're going to lose. They beat Ohio State. That'd be an emotional win. That'd be great. Teams with emotional wins like that crash the next week sometimes. Like, well, not even sometimes, just they crash. So
Yeah,
that game is key because if they lose 2 out of 3, right, they're gonna have to go into win now mode. And win now mode means they get a little tighter, they get a little more pressed. They're gonna make a mistake. They're gonna do stupid things. And Washington may or may not be that team you want to make a mistake against. Or, and as we all know, you don't want to go to Purdue ranked at night. It might be a night game. You don't want in there with that. So those are the two. Crazy things happen at the end of the year at Penn State.
Mo, and you like your Buckeyes' chances going to Happy Valley?
That's going to be the toughest game for Penn State this season. Penn State has disappointed at home against Ohio State more often than not. If James Franklin makes another 4th and 3 mistake in that stadium, the boosters may pay that buyout. It may be time.
Careful what
Ted doesn't agree. Ted doesn't agree. What is the buyout? Do we know what the buyout is?
I don't want to know. They'll pay it. That's not the
They'll
question.
pay it, but
that isn't. Money is no object when you're that upset.
Yeah, I'm just shaking my head over just James Franklin and some of these in-game decisions over the years, and that's something that needs to get better, right? I remember, I think it was last year against Ohio State. Maybe it was late first quarter. I can't exactly remember. I thought they were having success running the football, if I remember right, in the middle of the field against Ohio State, and then he just goes away from it when they clearly couldn't block the Buckeyes. Like some of these in-game decisions, and I know, Mike Yurcich, the offensive coordinator, of course is involved in this as well. But yeah, and of course Moen mentioned some stuff as well. So yeah, it's just they got to get better at these in-game decisions because that has been it's been a little bit of an Achilles heel of James Franklin during his tenure at Penn State since 2016.
All right. And moving right along, we just started talking about him to the Ohio State Buckeyes. They're always favorites. Ryan Day is leading the ship. And it's funny because I feel like we could block off everything but that last game for Buckeye fans. They actually don't care if they go 1-11 as long as they beat Michigan. Do you think that's true? Is that more true than the jokes would have?
No.
Well,
no. That Oregon game is important. We owe Oregon one.
Very true.
Yeah.
So right, I'm taking those two off of the choice list, Ted. Have at the rest.
So the big games, of course, it's so weird because Oregon is on, and that's a game that certainly, like Moen said, is it's maybe the game of the year.
It feels like football. Washington, Oregon from last year, a possible conference championship preview.
Right, it does. So that's obviously circled. Michigan it's so weird. As big of a game as that's going to be, it's just for Ohio State and Michigan has just been the absolute pinnacle of the sport, right? For the last few years, there's been everything on the line. The last game of the season, there's been some, of course, great sceneries with the snow in 2021 and all of these other things. But you got to circle Michigan. You have to. For as big as that Oregon game is going to be, I have to. Like Ohio State got Caleb Downs. They got Will Howard. They put a bunch of money. Right. Moen, I'm sure, has maybe a little bit more insight on this than I do. But when that confetti dropped, they're like, we got to do something. We got to do something. And maybe it was even before that when they lost to Michigan for the third consecutive year. This is going to be an extremely motivated Ohio State football team. And Michigan, it all comes down to that, right? It's just for how these teams look this season. I think Michigan can be a college football playoff team. Like I got them going 10-2 this year. If they get that quarterback situation figured out, right? I think you could see them more in the mold of that 2021 team with Cade McNamara, even going back to 2016 with Wilton Spate, right? Where they don't necessarily need great quarterback play, but they're really good in the other parts of the team. But, for Ohio State game of the year, I'm going to circle Michigan. Of course, you got Oregon on there as well. Penn State. Of course, is a big one, but I got to circle the Michigan Wolverines as well. Player to watch. I mean, where do I even go? This roster is stacked. I'm going to go maybe with Jeremiah Smith at wide receiver, right? There was, I talked to, for my Ohio State preview, I talked to Dan Hope from 11 Warriors. And what I was getting from him is that this guy's got a potential to maybe be wide receiver 1 as a true freshman when all is said and done. He was saying that a lot of people around the Woody Hayes Athletic Center are seeing that Jeremiah Smith is above a level, maybe I shouldn't say a level, but above where Marvin Harrison Jr. was at this point in his career, which is insane because Marvin Harrison Jr. was pretty far along, if you remember, early in his Ohio State career, getting on the field very early. So I look at Jeremiah Smith as maybe being that guy that if you throw the ball within 10 yards of him, he's going to go out and get it. Right, or get 5 yards, whatever it is. He's going to go out and get the football as well. But this defense is talent-wise, it's one of the best defenses I've seen in a very, very long time in the Big Ten Conference. Like you could argue their weakness is linebacker, but CJ Hicks is going to be in there and play a part. He was one of the top-rated players when he came out of high school a few years ago. Sonny Styles moves down from safety. They've got just insane and embarrassment of riches on this side. It's just like, please just do not murder Akron or Western Michigan or Marshall. If they wanted to, they could score 100. They could.
Yeah.
On Akron or some of those teams early on in the schedule. So it's crazy to me. But I'll go Jeremiah Smith. I'll go Michigan and Ohio State. Hey,
okay,
we're a national championship favorite for a reason.
Absolutely, they were my pick to win it all. That's not a curse of death. I got pretty good luck picking those kinds of things because I never pick my Huskies. Moen, what's your final word on the Buckeyes? I mean, other than the obvious.
$27 million is invested in this roster. If you can't beat Michigan with $27 million, Ryan Day's going to have to find a new job.
Yeah, best team that money can buy.
Yes.
I will say my one for the road is Iowa before Oregon. That to me is trap game all over it. It is in Columbus, but Iowa just has a way to frustrate you and grind you down. You cannot overlook them with Oregon looming on the horizon. So it's possible if they're going to trip up. I could see the Iowa Hawkeyes pulling off a crazy upset. All right, moving along to the other team that won up north, the only team that gets a directional description. Talking to you, my friends just to the south of me in the state of Oregon. How are we feeling about Michigan? Obviously, you're going to say Ohio State, but possibly line out one other game that really, really stands out to you there.
Yeah, it's Ohio State for them. Now, Michigan's in a weird spot, as Moen kind of mentioned, the roster improvements and the money spent for Ohio State. They're in a weird, I don't want to call it an underdog role, but, winning the conference 3 consecutive years, and now everybody's saying Ohio State is going to win the national championship. So it's a little bit of an odd situation, I think, for the Michigan Wolverines at this point in time. Another game that I have scheduled on this, I'm flip-flopping between Oregon and Texas. I guess I'll circle Texas. Texas had their top 2 running backs, CJ Baxter and one other guy. His name is slipping my mind right now. But they had their top 2 running backs go out. So now if Michigan can pin their ears back and get after Quinn Ewers, if they can get a win against Texas in week number 2, you look at the rest of the schedule, and they're, if we want to get to 10-2, if that's the barometer to get to the college football playoff, you can kind of breathe a little bit easier if you're able to beat Texas. Because even if you lose to both Oregon and Ohio State, there's a lot of winnable games in the schedule. Like USC, if you look at the interior, the offensive line and the defensive line, that is a terrible matchup for the Trojans. Like what Michigan does in that game against USC, they have one of the best pass rushes in the defensive lines in the country. I think they can get after the Trojans, certainly. And then they've got Will Johnson, who might be one of the best corners that can certainly cover as well back there. But, I look at Michigan, and it's that Texas game, it's that Oregon game that I certainly have circled. I mean, that's the first week in November for the Oregon Ducks. If Oregon can't get it done against Ohio State, there might be a little bit of a narrative. Dan Lanning still can't win the big game, could have a decent amount of pressure on him for that game. We'll see what the weather is like. Oregon's in the Pacific Northwest. They'll be fine. They'll figure it out. But still, it could certainly favor the elements, maybe could favor a run-heavy type of team, that being the Michigan Wolverines. Player to watch throughout this, that's an interesting one. Let's see. I think I want to stick on the offensive side of the ball. I guess I'll play it simple, and I'll go Donovan Edwards, of course, in the run game. Okay, he showed up in big moments during big games over the last few years. There's been games or stretches where he's just fallen off of a cliff. So he's got to be more consistent. Kaleo Mullings is the number 2 back, so we'll see how much of a step up he can be and how much of a role that he can be and make on this team as well. But they've got one of the best defenses. Them and Ohio State and Georgia are probably the 3 best defenses in the country this season. They got to lean on the defense. They got to lean on the run game, because even though Colston Loveland might be one of the best tight ends in America, the quarterback is a big, big time question for me.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, we're running up against the clock, everybody. So if we skip a few teams, I promise you we will come back to them next week. If you hear the plane overhead, apologies. But we want to get to kind of some of the big headliners and obviously our West Coast bias getting out here. But we would be remiss to not allow our friend Ted to talk about his beloved Wisconsin Badgers. So give us your games to watch. You can wear your glasses or not, Ted. It's up to you.
Yeah, I'm putting the glasses on, baby, for this one. I'm
go.
excited. I'm pumped. I'm ready to go for year number 2 of Luke Fickell in Madison. Look, Luke Fickell's a really good head coach. He's a borderline great head coach, right? Now, there's been some questions about Phil Longo and really taking this offensive scheme, ripping it up, doing something. You take 30 years of DNA, and now you want to do something completely different as well. But here's the thing. Now, Tyler Van Dyke comes in at quarterback, and the jury's still out what he's going to look like. But player to watch, I'm circling Tawee Walker, the transfer coming in from Oklahoma. I'm not saying that this is not going to certainly look like an I formation, big hogs up front, Wisconsin, Barry Alvarez, Brett Bielema style of football. But I think this team is going to run the football more than some people expect. I really do. They've got a deep running back room, Tawee Walker and Ches Malusi. You split those guys. And remember, there was a year where Phil Longo was at North Carolina, and they had not one but 2 1,000-yard backs. So it's not like this guy's just air raid throwing it all around the football field. I think he wants to play a balanced style of offense. I think they want to run the football with a couple of their guys. They've got a good returning offensive line as well. And then I look at their defense. They went into the portal, and they did a really good job retooling that linebacker room. I think they're going to be much improved coming off of the edge as well. Now, when you look at games to circle, there's a few on here. I'm going to circle the Alabama Crimson Tide game.
Yep.
Okay. And
you got to win that one for us, Ted. Come on, do it for the team.
Yeah. And here's why. That's going to tell us a lot of where this Badger program is. If they get run off the field, it's going to be like, well, they're still at 7-5 type of level. Luke Fickell, maybe it's going to be a little bit of a slower build than anticipated. If they're competitive with Alabama, then we can say, even if they lose, and I don't think they're going to win that game against the Crimson Tide, but if they're competitive, then you can start to see, the development of this program. And you kind of look at this stretch coming up, going on the road to USC. I think there's parts of Wisconsin's team. There's parts of Wisconsin team that can take advantage of some matchups there against USC. You look at Purdue, Rutgers, Northwestern. That's favorable. So if they lose to Bama, they find a way to beat USC. All of a sudden, you're looking at 3-1, 4-1, 5-1. All of a sudden, you're looking at a 6-1 football team going up, and you get Penn State at home. My hunch is that's going to be a night game at Camp Randall, the way that schedule is going to shake out. So if that team is carrying that much momentum, even if they lose another game, even if they're sitting there at 5-2, and they go to and Penn State comes to their house, that could be a big game. But following it up at Iowa, that's a tough turnaround as well for the Wisconsin Badgers. Iowa has been good in recent history in that battle for the Heartland Trophy as well. So defense takes a step up. I believe for Wisconsin this season, their success might ride on the shoulders of Tyler Van Dyke. If he's good TVD like he was under Rhett Lashley, I think this team could be very good. If he's inconsistent and there's turnovers, like maybe he was under Josh Gaddis, maybe it's a lot like last year. So I think there's a floor, there's a ceiling, and there might be a three game gap there in between.
Yeah, it's that as fair warning is our resident Minnesota Golden Gopher, but last 5 are tough. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Even if you could lump Minnesota in there, it's rivalry game, last game of the season, regardless of how each team's record shakes out. You're always going to get up for a game like that. So it's very Marylandish to me. You better win early, because that last stretch is very, very tough.
Yeah, you gotta find a way. I think if you want to improve on your record, which is 7-5 in the regular year, and then the bowl loss, if you want to improve your record, I think you got to run the table: Purdue, Rutgers, and Northwestern. Right? You cannot have a loss. Like, as a Badger fan, there are 2 games in there. They've beaten Purdue. I got to look back 17 straight times. Wisconsin has beaten the Boilermakers. That is not a vocal version of a typo. But then you also look at the other hand of this, at Northwestern. There were so many times growing up where the Badgers were 18th in the country. They're doing good. Northwestern is 3-5, and then somehow we find a way to lose in Evanston, right? It's been a little bit of a Badger kryptonite going to, and that's going to be played at that 15,000 seat stadium as well. So if you're throwing the ball well early, you could get some lake effect. And that's just always been a game that I never say is going to be a guaranteed win. Like, I had the Badgers winning this game, but by 1 point. 1 point. That's how maybe little confidence I have in this series over time.
Okay. Right on. Well, I appreciate the realistic take and analysis, even though you're wearing your rose-colored glasses for your Badgers. I think it's definitely that last 4 is going to kind of be the tail of the tape of the season for what Wisconsin can be this year. And shooting, much like the flyover commercial way out west. Again, apologies to fans of other teams. We are struggling for time. We could probably revisit the ones we missed going into next week. The USC Trojans, much vaunted on offense, but Jekyll and Hyde when it comes to their defense. How do you think they fare this year?
Boy, this is it's an interesting one. Of course, adjusting to a new conference, that's pretty much the opposite of what they are, right? Mm-hmm. Run game and defense, as opposed to pass game and no defense. And the way this schedule, that LSU game, and we talked about it earlier in the show, that LSU game is, I think, going to dictate a lot, because if they're able to win that one, I think you feel really confident. And I think it really shifts the narrative of where you're at. You win that one, you beat Utah State. I think it's still tough to beat Michigan, although they could maybe be more competitive. Wisconsin, Minnesota. Like, this could be a 4-1 team. Penn State, maybe that's something that maybe that's an upset they could pull. Like, then if they beat Penn State, Maryland, Rutgers, Washington, if they can rattle off those, all of a sudden going into that Nebraska game, all of a sudden they're sitting in a spot where they're talking college football playoff. They're talking Big Ten championship. So will that happen? I think it's going to depend on that LSU game. To me, that's probably the game that I have circled right now. Like that's it's going to dictate so much. You lose to LSU, you lose to Michigan. If you lose to Wisconsin, now all of a sudden you're a 500 team going and playing a Penn State team that I think could be carrying a lot of momentum early in the season. Like, that LSU game right off the bat, I think really will tell us a lot about where this USC team is. They're going to be improved on defense. Like, I have a really good feeling of that. I don't think it's going to be as big of a jump as UCLA, right, made with Danton Lynn in 1 year over there in Los Angeles, but they're going to be improved. And this offense, it's still Lincoln Riley. It's still going to be a Lincoln Riley offense at the end of the day. I think they're going to be very explosive. Like, Zach Branch, I think could really take the Big Ten by storm. I think he could be a really big weapon. And then they've just got all kinds of weapons. Like, that's not something, okay, this depth of weapons, Oregon, USC, even Washington, right? This is not a group of teams at the Big Ten. We've seen Ohio State and them be explosive over the years. Of course, Penn State with Saquon Barkley had a few years in there as well. But other than that, there haven't been a lot of explosive teams. And now you get USC. Like, that's been the big question for them. Oh, can they handle the physicality of the Big Ten? Okay, I counter you by saying this. Can the Big Ten handle the speed, skill, and athleticism on the perimeter of USC? That's going to be and other West Coast teams. That's going to be a battle that I'm certainly looking forward to as well. For a player, I think I already said it, Zach Branch. I think he can be Mr. Electricity, certainly for this USC offense.
Okay. Yeah, it occurs to me that they basically have one major Power 5 opponent in their entire schedule. It's an absolute murderer's row. Because of Notre Dame, because of LSU. Like, I don't know why they take that LSU game knowing they play Notre Dame every year. It's absolutely insane to me. Becky or Moen, anything to add? I know, Becky, you and I both have high optimism for them coming up to Seattle.
No, I mean, like USC, it's USC. It's like Ted said, they're athletic as hell. Like, my question for the Big Ten has been, since the 4 teams got announced, was they're like, oh, you can't handle our defense. And it's like, can you beat us in a shootout?
Yep.
Can you beat us in a shootout? Guess what? Yep. Lincoln Riley does not care about if it's a shootout or a slugfest. He don't care. Can you beat USC in a shootout? That's the question.
Nobody loves Big Ten West rock fights more than me. Okay. I rewatched Iowa and Northwestern like a time and a half this offseason. That was for those of you that maybe are unaware, the final score of that game, 10-7. 10-7 at Wrigley Field.
I watched that game.
Okay.
It's like a first quarter score.
Yeah, it was the rock fights of rock fights.
Man.
But that's the thing. Like you have Iowa on one spectrum, you have USC. I really wish they would have played in a bowl game last year, right? Because they were the opposite. They were the opposite ends of each other. But like you look at USC, right? Okay, there's going to be like Michigan. Let's use Michigan as an example, right? Okay, Michigan. Yeah, you can be physical all you want, but can you score 30 points? Okay, we can beat you 31-28. Yeah, we'll get owned on the ground and you can rush it for 250 yards. But we're going to put up a lot of points as well. Like, that's going to be what I think a lot of these West Coast teams are going to say is like, hey, yeah, you might out-physical us, in this particular matchup, but can you score with us?
Yep.
Those are questions that will need to be answered for some of these traditional Big Ten West teams that maybe need to evolve a little bit as time goes on.
We need a new name for it. I think the Big Ten Very West, the Big Ten Far West. What are we going with here?
The Big Ten Pacific.
You're not even in the Rocky Mountains. You're still calling yourselves West. I mean, come on, people. Let's get it together here. Speaking of moving on up the coast to even further west, apologies to my Bruin friends. I'm throwing on the purple shades for this one because they are insanely talented and have high expectations.
That's not the purple team.
But still somehow overhyped. Despite how talented they are.
Hold on. Moen just wants to stare at that duck longer and get more and more angry.
Yeah, I put that on there just for you, Moen. That team out wherever you want to drown them in the ocean, but that team out west is here for you with their friendly.
That is not a thing. That's not a thing.
It's not. We all agree it's not. I just do it to upset Moen. All right, Ted, have at it.
Okay, so as I've talked to Pickles offline about, I went out to Washington for 2 weeks this summer, and it was great. It was fantastic. Loved it. The coastlines, the mountains, everything was fantastic about it. Immediately when I got home, I posted a video of bowing down to Washington and all the great scenery. And the first thing, I got a couple of DMs from Oregon people saying, you got to come to the Oregon coast. The Oregon coast is better. So we've got a coastal rivalry from coastlines, which can certainly be, I'm sure, debated about as well. Not only football teams, but also coastlines as well. But, when you look at this Oregon team, look, I've heard from a lot of Oregon people that this is the best roster that they've ever had. Okay,
they always say that.
This is a roster that has this is a program, that has made it to a national championship game. They've won Rose Bowls, etc. Right. So I think Dan Lanning has had a lot of talent over the years. I think this year, this team and what he's building is a lot of depth at that talent as well. So now you can go 2 deep. Now you can go 3 deep. Things like that. All right, let's talk about games first. I think it's fairly simple. I think it's Ohio State. They're in the middle of the season. I think that's certainly a game that they have circled right there. You get them at home. You get them at the Zoo. You get them at Autzen Stadium, right? You got Ohio State on the schedule. You got Michigan at the schedule, and Washington also at the end of the schedule. You got to win. You got to win. He has to win a big game this year, right? If Dan Lanning cannot win because, whether it's been Oregon State, he was able to beat them this last year, but you look at Washington, right, not being able to beat them as well. So he's done good against a lot of teams in his few years as a head coach, but he's got to win some of these marquee games for Oregon to really take that next step up as a program. Oh man, in terms of circling players, in terms of players to watch, I'm gonna go a little bit. I'm not gonna say Jabbar Muhammad because that might break a few hearts here on this panel. But I'm gonna go with a big.
He is darn good. I know that.
Yeah, he is. I'm gonna go a Big Ten transfer. How about that Big Ten beef in the middle of the defensive line, Derek Harmon? Okay. I think they needed to get a little bit better there in the middle. I think it was the Pac-12 championship game where Washington had a lot of success running the football at the Oregon Ducks, because I sometimes I get that game and the October game kind of mixed up with what exactly happened. But that was the Pac-12 championship game where they had some success running the football. So they needed to beef up to be able to do that. I think Derek Harmon, as well as Jamari Caldwell coming over from Houston, are a couple of guys that can certainly do that. Dylan Gabriel just fits so well into what they want to do. Short, efficient passing game, get their playmakers in space and let them go to work. So I think that's a really good fit there. I think he can be in the Heisman Trophy conversation as well. I'm very intrigued of what would be considered a disappointment for Oregon. So if they go 10-2 and they lose to Ohio State and they lose to Michigan, but say they beat Washington at the end of the year, they get into the playoff. I'm curious how far they need to make it for it to be considered. Like if they lose in the first round, if that happens, that's certainly, I think that's a failure of a season. That 10-3 type of hypothetical season for Oregon is certainly not the direction that they want to go in. Like you look at last year, they were one game away from getting to a 14 college football playoff. I think they got to get to the semifinals. To be honest with you, I think they got to get to the semifinals. I think that's, for how good and how loaded this roster is, I think that's where they got to get to, right, to be successful. If they make it to the championship, great. If they win the championship, also great. But it's a great Oregon team. It is top to bottom, and really excited to see him go to work.
Yeah, Becky, what do you think?
Oregon. The thing with Oregon, this is their, like Ted said, every one of their fans is saying this is the best team they've ever had. Dan Lanning has beaten every team he has played but one. He is 0-3 against that team. He is 1-4 against his rivals.
Yep.
Those are the only losses he has. The key for Oregon this year is they have to beat Ohio State at home. The season's almost basically a failure if they don't, especially if they lose at Michigan. If they lose those two games and they don't make the Big Ten championship game, for them, I think that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt. It's going to hurt a lot of pride, because at that point, they're just going to be like, hey, we got to go into the playoff and do well. If they don't make the playoff for some reason, that's really going to make them angry. And they have really 4 games on here. There's only 4, maybe 5 if you want to count Purdue. They have 4 games on here that are going to be tough. And, people are going to say, well, people want me to say it's Oregon State. It's not. It's that Boise State game. People don't know this. Really good Oregon State teams have lost to Boise State.
They've never
lost to Boise State. I can't even begin to describe to you how. Like, we all remember that it was the punch in the face game, Garrett Blunt. Like,
oh gosh,
that Oregon team was really, really good. Could not beat Boise State. Could not even, just couldn't do it.
And Boise's supposed to be pretty darn good this year. I mean,
Boise's going to have
Oregon needs to win that game, otherwise they will come off as frauds. But Boise's going to put up a fight either way.
Boise's going to be the tough game early in the year. Oregon State's it's a rivalry. Anything can happen. I'll just tell you this: Dan Lanning has had nightmares of 30-plus consecutive runs ever since that game in 2022. Hence why he beefed up his D-line like crazy.
Yeah. That's why he got Harmon from Michigan State. That's the exact reason he went and got a guy like that.
Most of the money spent has been on that D-line. after that, again, like I said, if they lose 3 games and don't make the playoff, they lose 4 games and don't make the playoff, utter failure for the Ducks. Utter failure. I don't know.
Yep.
Lanning will enter the hot seat next year if that happens. But they have, like I said, they have everything's favorable to go 12-0 or 11-1. Everything's set up for it.
Yep.
The question is, where are they going to fail? Because Dan Lanning sucks. He is the West Coast version of Mario Cristobal in the last 2 minutes.
Oh, I was going to go one step further. He's the West Coast James Franklin. We now have a doppelganger James Franklin in there. That's how their seasons have.
Unlike Franklin, it's just because Lanning's hyper aggressive, which cool, but it cost him last year. So
Oregon has in fact never beaten Boise. They're 0-3 all time.
Yep.
Yeah, Moen, what's your last word on your BFFs, the Duckies? Or you got nothing on them? You're just skipping right.
I got nothing. We're moving on to Washington.
Moving on to Washington. All right, Ted. You know we got bones to pick with this one, but I'll let you have your piece first.
Okay, yeah. So I got a feeling that we're gonna have a decent discussion on this particular game. Let's go player first. I like the tandem in the backfield. I think Jonah Coleman and Cam Davis is a really good combination at running back.
Big backs.
I'm going to circle Denzel Boston, though, right? Because I think you need somebody to step. I mean, that's a generational wide receiver last year. And let's call it as it is. It's in the discussion with that LSU 2019, right? As some of the best wide receiver groups, offenses of the last 10 decades, however much time you want to say in recent history. So
in any season where Marvin Harrison Jr. isn't also in the running, Rome Odunze wins the Heisman, or not the Heisman, rather, or Michael Penix Jr. wins the Heisman, and Rome Odunze wins the Biletnikoff.
Yeah, that Heisman was very interesting because after that Oregon game, because a lot of stats, right, that goes into a big portion of who wins the Heisman or not. Michael Penix Jr. Right, there were a handful of games, if I remember correctly, that maybe he didn't put up the greatest stats in the world, maybe as compared to Jaden Daniels, but whatever. That's neither here nor there. I probably would have voted for Michael Penix Jr., but that's just me. Didn't want an SEC person to certainly win the Heisman Trophy. But anyway, I digress. Denzel Boston, I think, is the guy that maybe is going to step up. I know Jeremiah Hunter is in that room as well, and he's led Cal in receiving. But Denzel Boston appears, from what people are kind of saying out west in Seattle, that he's going to step up and be that guy to lead the receiving room. But they got a solid 3. You throw Giles Jackson in there as well, who's somehow eligible this season. Is very interesting. Roman at Locked On Huskies has explained it to me, and it still kind of goes over my head a little bit. But but that's fine over there as well. And then when I look at games, I think I got to return the favor on Rutgers, and I'm going to say Rutgers. I'm going to say both those teams have those games circled, because when I look at Washington's schedule, I feel pretty confident they can start 4-0. Could they lose to Washington State? Maybe. I mean, you guys probably know better about the Cougars than I do. Got to do a little bit more research on that one.
Northwestern, for the Cougs.
Yeah, Northwestern is a game. They get them at home, and I feel that they can win that game. They're just more talented. If they beat Rutgers, now all of a sudden you're looking at an undefeated game. Michigan goes to Husky Stadium. Washington, I would safely assume, is ranked at that point in time. Now all of a sudden, if Washington is carrying that momentum, that's certainly, and then you have Iowa. If Iowa still has a lot of problems. Now, here's the thing with Iowa. Look at some of these teams outside of the Big Ten West that they've played. Like, you look at Tennessee and what they were able to do against them. When you take fast, skilled teams against the Iowa Hawkeyes and you get rid of the football quickly, there's times where you can find success against the Iowa Hawkeyes. Like, they can beat Iowa. They can beat Indiana. They can beat UCLA. Like, this is a team where if every single thing clicks, they could go 8-4. I could very well see that going for the Washington Huskies. My big concerns for Washington are the offensive line and the defensive line. All right? Those are very big concerns for me, right? They won the Joe Moore Award last year. Everybody gone. They had some pretty good pass rushers on the defensive line. A lot of those guys are gone as well. Like you look at Michigan, if you can't contain their pass rush, it could be a long day at the office for Will Rogers. That's where my concerns really come in, because now all of a sudden, if this offensive line gets pushed back against like Iowa, who has a good defensive line, against Michigan, who has a good defensive line, against Rutgers, who has a good defensive line, against Penn State, who has a good defensive line, they get pushed back. Now they can't run the football, right? So that's where the source of my issues really come in. I think they're better in the secondary than a lot of people think. Ephesians Price not coming up from Arizona, Elijah Jackson out there as well. I think Harrington coming over from Oklahoma, I think should be a good add as well. Tupatala and Bruner at linebacker are pretty solid, but once again, for me, it comes down to the line of scrimmage. This is a line of scrimmage league, and for Washington, I'm concerned. I'm concerned about the front on both the offensive line and the defensive line. And I had them going 6-6. And that's where maybe I had the inconsistencies where maybe they can beat a USC, but maybe they can't beat some of those teams in the middle of their schedule.
Yeah. Let's see if I can do this correctly. So I'll segue into it because we'll go to the full predictions. And you can imagine my chagrin when you have the beloved Washington Huskies going 6-6 after a 14-win season. I understand, but I actually think 6-6 is the floor. I think our rankings are actually really similar. I don't see too many huge discrepancies. We're maybe a lot more bullish on Northwestern, but that bottom of the conference is going to be such a blender with random teams picking up wins here and there. But yeah, to get back to the Huskies, I completely agree with you. You're going to live or die by the trenches for Washington. Their skill positions, they're very good. I do think the system and Will Rogers being from Mike Leach, where you maybe only dump it for 5 yards, but you're throwing 40 passes a game. Your running game isn't a traditional running game. It's a short pass and get into space. It's an extension of the running game via the pass. That can help with a bad offensive line. They are supposed to have some injury guys back. Washington is all potential and a lot of question marks. That's
It is. And here's the thing. They were running air raid, right? Typical, very traditional air raid with Mike Leach over there, which it's a lot of if that's not there, do this. If that's not there, do that. And then now, from what I understand, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm still getting a little bit up. Now, I had Washington, and I'm watching Washington the whole year last year, and now everything's different. I'm like, well, now I got to start from square one yet again. So I might be still catching up a little bit. I feel pretty good, but there still might be some things that I'm catching up on. From what I understand, this offense is very RPO-based. It's very decision-based. It's very cerebral, where the quarterbacks have to be able to, where it says it's almost, I'll call it robotic, in that Mike Leach air raid, very mathematical, whereas this is more, the quarterbacks need to be a little bit more cerebral and maybe need to read things a little bit more in this offense. So, look, I think Will Rogers is going to translate. I think he's going to be just fine, but it is a little bit different in maybe the approach and what the offenses look like. So,
the experience certainly helps. I mean, SEC, I think he's top 3 all-time SEC passer. And even though he might not have the raw ability like we're so used to Penix slinging it 50 yards down the field, he's not that guy. But he does have the experience to make the right play at the right time.
Here's the thing when it comes to Will Rogers. You're going to see the true freshman. 100%.
At times, yeah.
Times. No, they're going to play him. They're going to play him. He is it's a guarantee he will step foot on the field. So Williams will get snaps.
I'm excited about the future. Like Jed Fish, or what is he? The top 20, top 25 recruiting classes of right now. Damon Williams, from everything I've heard, he's the truth. He's the guy. There have been people out there saying there could be a point midway through the season where you see a quarterback flip in terms of the start. Now, I don't know if that is exactly going to happen, but it has been something that's maybe been floated out there if things go a certain way. But I'm excited for this future. And look at Jed Fish, what he was able to do at Arizona, okay? He's got it kind of like I compare it to Matt Rule at Nebraska, right? When Matt Rule took over Baylor and even Temple, this was a Baylor team that was 1-11. Sound familiar? Arizona was also 1-11, and they followed similar rebuilds. Matt Rule had a little bit of a higher ceiling at Baylor than Jed Fish did at Arizona. But I see a similar type of rebuild. Like when you look at Nebraska last year, they improved by 1 game. They won 5 games. And now they're slated to maybe win 8 or 9 this season. I could see maybe Washington. I had them going 6-6. But it wouldn't surprise me to see with DeMond Williams 1 year into the system, next year he takes over as the starting quarterback, and now you start to maybe stockpile these recruiting classes and stack them and build them. And now Washington is maybe back to that 9 or 10 win level, and now they're back to, and now the Big Ten just gets even deeper, right? When you add another team that can win 10 games.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, like the big thing with Washington is the secondary. Not a lot of people know this. They only have one player that's going to play in the secondary who's under 6 feet tall.
Yeah, they're long and they're fast. Very high potential.
Fast. And specifically, Prysock, Ephesians Prysock, he is 6'4", 193, and he's probably going to be the fastest guy in the field, no matter who they play. He is long.
We don't play Ohio State, for the record.
No, even if we did, he may be the fastest player on that. He is fast. The big thing with Washington will be it's not the O-line for me; it's the D-line depth. D-line is going to take. Now, they do have a true nose tackle. He's 368 pounds.
Yeah.
Just as a backup. But you have one defensive lineman who's going to come off the edge. He only weighs 230. And then you have Durfee coming off the other edge who weighs about 260. So the interior is 297, 300 pounds, right in there. They're big, but they're not going 4 deep, 5 deep like an Oregon or an Ohio State can do. They're going to go about 2 to 3 deep. So it's that to me will be the deciding factor when it comes to Washington. The O-line I think is going to be fine. I know people have question marks there, but the right side is all over 300 pounds. The left tackle and the left guard are not. Center over is 300 plus pounds. They're big. They're long, and I do mean long. 6'8" at left tackle. He's a redshirt freshman, Fasalo. And then you have 6'7" at right tackle and as a party. That's completely different than what UW had before. So, I would. Brennan Carroll, he knows what he's doing. O-line wise, he does not call plays. He's the offense coordinator, but he does not call plays. Jed Fish does. Carroll will be hands-on with the O-line, because he is also the O-line coach. So that's what he'll be doing. They have the quarterback coach, and Jed Fish will take care of it. And with the tablets now and everything on the sidelines, I'm fine with this. But yes, the question marks are huge. 6 wins, I'm fine with that. I was okay with it. I was like, that's fine. 6-6 seems real.
I would say the easiest summation of the whole thing for Washington is low floor, high ceiling program year one. And with upward momentum, as you said, heading forward.
Let's say Colorado.
Moen, you want to give final thoughts as we wrapping up here?
Yeah, sure. I want to thank Big Ten Ted for coming on tonight, Ted.
Absolutely.
Much appreciated, sir. You're an honor. You're a scholar and a gentleman. Tell them about Big Ten Nation.
Yeah, I'm excited. Recently, this was tomorrow, actually, will be the 3rd edition of the show. So really, I focused on short form, 8 to 12 minute videos before. I launched the audio, I can't remember, maybe 6 months ago-ish, sometime during the off season. I forgot exactly when it was. Hold on, my camera went out.
Technical difficulties?
There you go.
There you go.
Okay, I should be back now. All right, I'll wrap this up here fairly quickly so I can get that figured out. But Big Nation doing that Tuesday nights and Thursday nights. It's a 1 hour program now, so it's a little bit longer as well. Covering more of the conference, I think, than I did before. So excited. Tomorrow going to start breaking down some football games. I'm so excited to be able to be doing that. Finally, all sorts of great coverage here during the season. So I would invite everybody to come check it out. Tuesday and Thursday nights, 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Central is when it premieres over there. So come and join us in the chat. It's a lot of fun to get a big nation together. So I'm excited. It's been really fun. It's been a very positive response so far, and I'm so excited for the season. I'm so excited to be in Huntington Bank Stadium on Thursday, and it's going to be rocking. I'm so pumped. This has been a season 12-team playoff video game, all this stuff, and now we're finally here and we're finally ready to go.
Yeah, and if you just saw a bite-sized sample of what Ted knows tonight, guys. If you go to his channel on YouTube, he's got season previews for all 18 Big Ten teams, talking to the experts. Those who know Ted knows. So definitely check out Big Ten Ted on YouTube and Big Ten Ted on Twitter. Give him a follow, give him a subscribe if you're over there. Become a member, become a Ted head today. You will appreciate the content he provides you. So
Awesome.
You want to take us out, Pickles?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much again, Ted. We had so much Big Ten talk, we couldn't fit it into one Big Ten Mafia show. We're going to have overflow. We got weeks to talk about this. We'll have games to talk about, which is absolutely exciting. But thank you so much again for being here. I'm Sergeant Pickles with Becky Go Huskies mowing after dark and special guest Big Ten Ted from the Big Ten Mafia show, part of the College Football Mafia. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you next week. Goodbye, everybody.